All right, so the ship moves. We've got all that worked out. I did go ahead and prefab everything, and all of my prefabs were unorganized. So I took them and I made folders inside of my prefabs folder so that I can sort things a little bit easier because I'm only going to be adding things to the game. If I was already overwhelmed by the number of prefabs, then I figured it was probably time to go ahead and make it so that it was easy to find what I'm looking for. So I have a comments folder, a layout folder, a managers folder, and a player folder. You don't have to have these types of folders. You don't have to have any folders at all. It's up to you. I just like it for the sake of organization. Um, I've got, and of course, if your theme of your game isn't space themed, it's probably not comments. It's like the candy folder or something like that. And my layout folder has my background sprite, it has my canvas, and it has my main camera. My managers folder has my level manager and my scene loader. And my player folder has the bullet and the yellow player. So, I figured a good first step here is to get our scene flow figured out before we figure out dying and all of that stuff. So in our scenes folder, we did import from our last package. We had a start screen and our game over screen. I'm going to load this up. Don't freak out. It's going to look very distressing. All right. No cameras rendering. Everything looks all kinds of messed up. That's because remember we prefabbed our camera on the last game, so it's missing that prefab. Doesn't have a camera, and it doesn't have any of the text files or anything like that. So I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to take this canvas and I'll actually leave it for now. Let's see. For layout, we know we need our main camera. So now we have a camera rendering and we're good there. And we also probably want to go ahead and change our font to what we actually want it. So our title text was already a Text Mesh Pro text. So I'm going to go into my fonts folder, grab my Space Age font and change that. And my background of my scene, I actually think I'm going to go ahead and use my background sprite from my game. So I'm going to grab my layout and grab my background sprite. Actually, hang on. Undo that. I'm going to, on my canvas, I'm going to create a UI and then I'm going to create an image. And I'm going to take the background that I want. So that's in my stock. I haven't actually made a folder that's going to contain all of my stuff yet. So that's on me. Probably not great. I think it was 5. Yes, it was 5. So let's grab this image, take 5, drag that over into the sprite. And then I'm going to click Set Native Size. So what that does is it just makes that picture as big as the picture actually is. And so now it's filling up my screen nicely. It looks kind of crazy on the left side, but that's because we are on the UI scale now. You will notice everything is now in front or is now behind my image, right? It's not where it should be. So I'm going to grab Rectangle Transform and I'm going to right click and click Move to Back. And now it is behind everything else in my UI. It's great. Solves all my problems. My game's not called Robo Escape this time, so let's go ahead and change my title text to Comets. Comets. And I'm going to show you a neat trick with buttons here. So I'm actually going to delete my start button and my quit button because we're going to remake them neater. So I'm going to right click on my canvas, UI, and I'm not going to add a button. I'm going to add a text, Text Mesh Pro text. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my Space Age font, call this Start Game. And let's do some sizing here. So make it so that it all fits like so. Nice and centered. And I'm going to drag this probably up a little bit. Yeah, there we go. All right. Now I'm going to turn this into a button. So what you can do is with a text component, you don't have to actually have a button. You just have to add the button component. So if you go to add component and type in button, it now makes it so that you can do all the things you did on the button, but without the background picture. You're just putting it on the text. You're turning the text into the button. So I need to add to my list, and I need my scene loader object. And on my scene loader, start game, remember, is load next scene. So now whenever I click start game, it'll load the next scene. And let's go ahead and make the highlighted color. I'm going to use, this is a tool we haven't used yet. So this is the eyedropper. And you can scan literally over anywhere on your screen. So if I wanted to pick a color way up here, I could. But I'm going to use this cool orange color for my start game. And make it so that whenever I hover over it, it turns orange. Very nice. Boop. And whenever I click on it, it says error because I haven't added it to the build settings yet, and so I know how to fix that. I'm just not going to do it just yet. So let's rename this Text Mesh Pro Text to Start Button. And now we don't have a bunch of stuff nested under my Start button. It is literally just the text, right? So I'm going to duplicate this because it's got all the stuff on it I want it to have. I'll put it right under Start Game. Rename this Quit Button. Scene Loader, instead of Load Next Scene, needs to go to Quit Game. Highlighted color, do I want it to turn red? I think I want it to kind of gray out whenever I hover over Quit Game. And obviously I need it to say Quit Game. So I'm going to grab my text here and change that to quit, and I'm going to center it, and let's make sure this one is centered. Okay. And another good way to make sure it's centered on our screen, we haven't worried about this before, we've been eyeballing it, but I can just change my transform on my text to 0, like so. My title text is already centered, so that it doesn't, we don't have to worry about getting it perfect. So yeah, that's all we have to do for that. It's all fixed, all good there. So we've got this canvas that's got all of the information. We probably want to replace our game over canvas with this one because we want it to kind of be a unified design. I actually think I'm going to move everything down a little bit on mine because I think, all my text at least, I think I want it more centered. Yeah, that looks better. All right. So let's go ahead and prefab our canvas, but let's not just call it canvas. Let's be a little bit more descriptive. Let's call it intro, outro canvas. So this is the canvas for the intro scene and the outro scene, basically. And let's see, if I had dragged it in and it was just called canvas, it would have interfered with this other one that's just called canvas. So I'm going to drag it into my layouts. So now I have all of that prefabbed. Perfect. I'm going to save my scene and go into my game over scene where everything looks like a hot mess. I'm going to just delete pretty much everything in here because I don't really need it, because I'm going to drag in my main camera prefab and nope, not that canvas. Boop. This canvas, my intro outro canvas. So yeah, now everything is on there. And let's just change this information. Title text, don't want it to say Comets, I want it to say game over, right? And I'm okay with it being real tall and being up towards the top here. And then start button is no longer going to be our start button, it's going to be our play again button. Gonna rename the words. Play again, question mark. And quit is still gonna be that. Play again needs to change button wise, right? This should all start to make sense to you as far as what we're doing. So this should be familiar. If it's not, then maybe you need a little bit more practice. All right, use my scene loader, use play again, quit button. Oops, don't need my selector because I can just drag it in. All right, quit button, grab my scene loader, and use quit. Perfect. Save this scene, and I think I'm going to drag these two things down just a hair. It's a little crowded. There we go. All right. So now we have our scene flow set up, and let's go ahead and go into our build settings and make sure that everything's dragged in. So right now we only have our prototype scene, so we need our start screen before that and our game over scene after it. Start screen, prototype, game over. Perfect. So if I hit play here, I should be able to hit play again and go back. Let's double check. Yep. Scene loader, play again, not set to an object. Interesting. I'll have to look at that. All right, whenever I get here, it shows me this scene. All right. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. Okay. Let's look at play again. And scene loader is looking for something. It's probably going to open Visual Studio and see what it says. So it's looking on line 18, scene loader is looking for something on play again, and I don't know what it's looking for. Okay. Oh, it's looking for level manager reset game. We don't have that right now, so I'm going to comment that out, but I'm going to leave it because we will eventually be dealing with our level manager, but for right now we are not. So it's commented out. It should not affect the game anymore. So if I go to Unity again, I can hit play again, and now it doesn't have the error. Perfect. That was a new bug. I didn't encounter that whenever I was figuring stuff out for this video, so that's fun. Okay, so we've got our order of events. So let's go into our prototype scene. We need to make it so that our objects have collision. So I'm going to show you how to do one of these, and then I will probably just let you, kind of run off on your own and do it, because watching me make colliders for everything is going to be a little bit silly. But for the sake of this, we need to kind of focus in because it's a little bit different than before. Now, my ship, you may notice, is not either a circle or a box, which are the two types of colliders we've used so far. So in this instance, we need to use a polygon collider 2D. A polygon collider 2D, as you can see, it's going to generate something super wacky looking because it has no idea what you're dealing with. So if you click Edit Collider, I can now grab this from any point and start messing with it. So I'm going to kind of try and make it into the shape of my ship, roughly. Now, one thing that you want to note from a game designer's perspective is that players really don't enjoy it when your colliders are too close to the edge. Think of it like their eyes don't move quite as fast as a computer can scan the picture, right? So it appears whenever they run into something, they think they haven't run into anything. And they don't realize that it's already run into something because their eyes just haven't picked up on it yet. So you always want your colliders to be just slightly on the inside edge. You always want to err on the inside than on the outside. You don't want to have your collider circling the ship because that would lead to a very frustrating experience for your players. So polygon collider, and all of my shapes are going to be weird shapes. None of them are perfectly circle. So I'm going to make a polygon collider for each one, and I'm just going to use Edit Collider on each one to make it look roughly correct. And you'll note this isn't like perfect. I could probably fine tune this a little bit to make these sides match a little bit more, but it's really not important. What's important is that it roughly follows the edges of the ship. I'm not going to worry about these little, I don't know, guns or thrusters, whatever these are. I'm just going to worry about the main body of the ship. On the other pieces, I'm pretty content to let those just hang out, and if they touch something, then it's fine. Because at that point, the player's probably about to collide with something anyway. Make sure you apply that back to the prefab so that all of your ships, whenever you instantiate them, will have that polygon collider. And go ahead and make colliders for all of your obstacles. In my case, it's my comets. I have 4 of them. I have the big ones, and then I have the little ones that my comets are going to break off into. So make sure while you're doing this, also think about, like, whenever you do your game, and do you have the sprites you need to make it so that whenever your big sprite breaks up, it breaks into smaller sprites? So double check all that stuff now and go ahead and make your colliders. All right, I've got all my colliders done. They are pretty good, and in case you missed it, to zoom in on something really easily, if you click on the object in the hierarchy and it's not on your scene view over here, you can put your mouse over the scene view and tap F on your keyboard, and it will automatically zoom into it. So I've got everything figured out there. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Well, that was a lot. I'm going to zoom out. I'm actually going to move this comet right here in front of my player, because I would like to double check that my colliders are working as intended, because basically what they should do is just kind of run into each other and nudge each other around. Perfect. It's running into it. It's not hitting anything. I'm spinning wildly because I need to really tweak my controls, but there we go. All right. So I've run into that. I've got my colliders done. Now I need to add some what happens if you run into something else functionality. So let's go ahead and go into our player script and mess with that, because we want our player to tell us when we run into something, what happens. So, player. This is what we have so far, and I'm going to show you a neat trick. Whenever you are not working with a section of the code and you want to get it out of your way, you can hover over the left side here. There's a bunch of these little minus signs, and whenever you hover over them, it shows you what it's going to minus. I'm going to hide some methods that I know I'm not going to mess with, at least for a while. So I'm going to hide screen wrap. And now it's got these little dots next to it saying this method has some information in it. I'm also going to go ahead and hide player movement because I'm not going to do anything with it for right now. So now I've got a much cleaner workspace to deal with, and I don't have to worry about running into things. So let's go ahead and whenever we run into something, we use on collision enter 2D. Just like we did with the blocks. Basically, whenever our ball ran into the block, it would do something. So I'm going to go underneath of the player movement, and I'm going to do a private void on, and as I start typing, it should start to fill. I want to do on collision enter 2D, and it fills in all that good stuff for me. And I want to make it so that when I run into something, I am going to destroy myself, basically. So whenever I run into something, I want to die. I'm going to do it in a very simple way first, and then I'm going to show you a slightly fancier way that we're going to use to do a little bit more flexible stuff. So I could just say on collision enter 2D, and then I could say destroy game object, right? That's what we did for our blocks. Whenever we ran into the block would destroy itself. So, oops, that's not the right thing. That's my browser. Let's go to Unity. Okay. So if I were to save that and play, whenever I run into this, it destroys itself, right? Which is fine, but now it doesn't do anything that we need it to do. So let's do a little bit of prep work here. I know that I want to have some sounds when I die. And I know that I want to load the next scene whenever my player dies. And eventually we'll add kind of a life mechanic to that. But for right now, I wanted to go to the game over scene. We're going to use something called a coroutine. A coroutine is this nifty piece of code that makes it so that you can kind of run this piece of script separately outside of the timing of the rest of the script. It's kind of confusing probably for you for now, but it's not a super complex thing once you get into it. So I'm going to, underneath of my on collision enter, I'm going to make a new method, and it's going to start very different than anything else that we have done before. It's going to be IEnumerator. So IENUMERATOR, the first two letters of which are capitalized, and then there's a method name like you're used to, and then parentheses, and then curly brackets. So that's going to be a method. I'm not going to put anything in it just yet. I want to say start coroutine, and then in parentheses, you have to say which coroutine you're going to start. I'm going to start the coroutine player death, which has parentheses inside of it, and then that. So right now we've got it a little bit, it doesn't return a value. So with a coroutine, it has to have a yield return in it somewhere, which you don't have to understand, just kind of follow along with me. I'm going to just go ahead and yield return new, and then I'm going to use wait for seconds, and then I'm going to say 2. It's going to wait for 2 seconds, and then it's going to return just waiting for an amount of time. And up here in the very top, I'm going to go ahead and serialize field. And I'm going to call this field an audio clip. It's going to be death sound. And I'm going to make a new header for this section because I'm going to have lots of different effects in here. So I'm going to call this section FX. Death sound, right? We've got it declared here. So in our player death, first thing that we want to do before anything happens, we don't want to wait for any amount of time. We want to go ahead and play our sound. So just like with our other game, we don't want it to destroy itself when the player destroys itself. We want it to play independently. So we're going to use audio source.playClipAtPoint. And then we need to tell it where to play. So let's call death sound. We're going to tell it to play at the camera dot main dot transform dot position. So whenever this runs, right now we're not going to destroy ourselves, so we got rid of that little bit, but what it's going to do is it's going to play a death sound, and then it's going to wait for 2 seconds. And then after it waits for 2 seconds, I want it to destroy itself. And then I want it to load the next scene. Now, this isn't going to work for a second, so let's go ahead and type in this code because we know it's a scene manager, load scene, and we want to load the scene named game over, which, double check that yours is named that. That's what mine was named in the last project, and that's the one we imported. So, and we need to go up to the top, and we need to add using Unity engine dot scene management. Boop. That should have fixed that. So now it should say when I run into something, play a sound. You're going to wait for 2 seconds. Then you're going to destroy yourself and load the game over scene. And in Unity, it's not going to have that sound in it yet, right? So we need to go ahead and drag our sound in. So if we look at our player script, death sound is here. It needs looking for an audio clip, and it is not there. My assets had sounds with it, so I'm going to go ahead and go in here to, let's see, is it sounds? Yes. And outside of this project, I'm going to go through and I'm going to grab all of the stuff so I don't have to keep delving into my stock folder. But I want that death sound to be the thing that's playing. I'm going to apply that back to the prefab to make sure it's on all of my yellow ships. Let's see if this works. It plays sound, 2 seconds, on the game over scene, play again, start game, I run into it, it plays the sound, and it destroys itself and goes to the last scene. Perfect. So the last little bit, in our next video, to make our player death really feel finished. We're going to go ahead and add some explosion effects. We're going to do it a little differently. Last time we did our visual effects with a particle system. This time we're going to animate a sprite using sprite sheets. So that's going to be a whole video all by itself, is just how to set up animations and use sprite sheets. So that's what you have to look forward to next.